Professor Velnara's tentacles twitched with satisfaction as she addressed her xenobiology class at the Galactic University. The amphitheater was filled with students from dozens of species crystalline zephirites whose bodies chimed softly as they took notes, gaseous nebulans floating in their containment suits, and the insectoid tick Theri clicking their mandibles in understanding. "As we've established," she said, her voice carrying through the universal translator, regenerative capabilities vary dramatically across species. The Altarian salamander folk can regrow entire limbs. The crystalline collective can reconstruct their mineral matrices completely. However, primitive species like humans possess virtually no regenerative abilities beyond basic wound healing. A few students nodded their various appendages. It was common knowledge throughout the galaxy humans were fragile, short-lived creatures whose bodies scarred permanently and aged linearly. They were considered remarkable for their adaptability and ingenuity, but biologically unremarkable. Once damaged, Professor Velnara continued, human tissue forms fibrous scar tissue that serves as a permanent reminder of injury. They cannot regrow lost organs, limbs, or even repair significant damage to. Actually, Professor, that's not entirely accurate. The voice came from the back of the amphitheater. Every head, optical sensor, and consciousness node turned toward the speaker, a young human exchange student named Marcus Chen. He was part of the cultural exchange program, one of only a dozen humans studying at the university. Professor Velnara's bioluminescent patches flickered with irritation. In her 3 centuries of teaching, she had rarely been interrupted, especially by a member of the species being discussed. "Mr. Chen, while I appreciate your personal perspective, the scientific literature on human regenerative capabilities is quite extensive and clear." Marcus stood up slowly, his movements drawing the attention of every being in the room. "Professor, may I approach?" The Velnaran professor's tentacles writhed a sign of deep annoyance, but academic protocol demanded she allow student participation. "Very well, but please make it brief. We have considerable material to cover." Marcus walked down the steps of the amphitheater, past rows of alien students whose various sensory organs tracked his movement. When he reached the front, he began rolling up his left sleeve with deliberate care. 3 years ago, he said, his voice carrying clearly through the silent chamber, "I was in a shuttle crash on Kepler 442b. The wreckage tore through my forearm muscle, bone, tendons, everything. The medical reports are in the university's database, if you want to verify." Professor Velnara's patches dimmed slightly. She had indeed seen those reports during Marcus's admission process. The injury had been catastrophic. Marcus finished rolling up his sleeve and extended his arm toward the class. Where there should have been a massive scar, the permanent fibrous tissue that every textbook described as inevitable in human healing, there was instead perfectly smooth, unmarked skin. A collective intake of breath, chirps, clicks, and gaseous swirls filled the amphitheater. The Tikthari student in the front row extended a magnifying appendage to examine Marcus's arm more closely. "Impossible," Professor Velnara whispered, her translator barely catching the word. The medical reports clearly showed severe tissue damage. There should be extensive scarring. Marcus smiled an expression that most alien species had learned to interpret as indicating human amusement or satisfaction. "There was scarring, Professor. Extensive scarring, just like your textbooks predict." He touched the unmarked skin of his forearm gently. This regenerated completely 6 months after the injury. No medical intervention, no advanced alien technology. Just healing. "But humans don't," Professor Velnara started, then stopped herself. The evidence was literally standing in front of her. A Zephyrite student's crystalline structure resonated with confusion. If humans can regenerate tissue completely, why doesn't galactic medicine recognize this ability? Marcus looked around the amphitheater, meeting as many alien gazes as possible. Because it doesn't happen to all humans. Maybe not even most humans. And those it does happen to. He paused, choosing his words carefully. Well, we've learned to keep quiet about it. The implications of that statement rippled through the class like a shockwave. Professor Velnara's bioluminescent patches began pulsing rapidly, a sign of rapid cognitive processing. Mr. Chen, she said slowly, are you suggesting that there is a subset of humans with regenerative capabilities that has been deliberately concealed from galactic scientific knowledge? Not concealed exactly, Marcus replied. More like, not advertised. Humans have always been seen as the underdogs in galactic civilization. We're not the strongest, not the smartest, not the most technologically advanced, but we're survivors. And sometimes, survival means not showing all your cards at once. A Nebulan student's gaseous form swirled with agitation. But the scientific implications, if even a small percentage of humans can regenerate, then maybe humans aren't as primitive as everyone thinks, Marcus finished. Maybe we're still evolving. Maybe some of us already have. Professor Velnara approached Marcus, her tentacles extending to examine his arm more closely. Her advanced sensory apparatus detected no trace of scar tissue, no indication of previous injury. The skin was not just healed, it was perfect, as if it had never been damaged. How many? She asked quietly. How many what, Professor? How many humans can do this? Marcus's smile became enigmatic. I don't think that's something I should answer in a classroom full of representatives from every major galactic power. Do you? The silence that followed was profound. Every student in the amphitheater understood the implications. If humans possessed hidden regenerative abilities, even in small numbers, it changed everything about their species' perceived limitations and potential. Professor Velnara slowly returned to her podium, her worldview fundamentally shaken. She had built her career on cataloging the biological limitations of various species, establishing hierarchies of capability and advancement. Now, standing before her was evidence that even the most primitive species might harbor abilities that challenged every assumption. Class dismissed, she said finally, her voice barely audible through the translator. As students began filing out, buzzing with excited conversation in dozens of languages, Marcus rolled his sleeve back down and headed for the exit. Just before he reached the door, he paused and looked back at Professor Velnara. Professor, he called out, you might want to revise next week's lecture on human limitations. Turns out, we're full of surprises. The door closed behind him, leaving Professor Velnara alone with the realization that humanity's greatest strength might not be their adaptability or ingenuity, but their ability to keep secrets until the moment was right to reveal them